Um, I'm going to let you know that we are a little bit of housekeeping. Oh, there's Bob. Hi, Bob. Okay, a little bit of housekeeping. We are going to record today's program so that for any of our students who are unable to attend, they'll be able to listen or watch at a later time. The program today is aptly named Hiring the Legal Job Market Across the Board. And the thought behind the program is to hear from our representatives and employer partners on the differences between their geographic areas in terms of what's going on in the legal job market right now, and the differences between the types of organizations and how they're handling everything from recruiting to working remotely to future planning. So without further ado, I would like to invite our panelists to introduce themselves, and I will start with Donna Manion. Donna is the Director of Legal Recruiting and Personnel at Cahill, Gordon and Reindel, LLP. Donna, you want to give us a little bit of your background?
Sure, thank you. And thank you for inviting me here today. It's a pleasure to be a part of this panel. A little bit of my background. I'm at Cahill Gordon. I've been here for about 10 years, which has been great. I've been in the legal recruiting industry for 20, which is almost hard to believe, but true. And before that, I actually worked in higher education and student affairs. And I actually worked at the University of Albany as a residence hall director a very long time ago. So it's great to reconnect with the institution and be here with all of you today.
That's great, Donna. I didn't know that. Thank you so much for sharing that.
You're welcome.
And our next panelist that I'll introduce is Lillian Evans. Lillian is the Deputy Director of Legal Recruitment for the New York City Law Department Office of Corporation Counsel. Lily, welcome. A little background.
Thanks, Mary. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. Pleasure to be here remotely. I have been at the law department for about 8.5 years, 7.5 years, or actually more like 9, I guess now. About 8 of those years in recruitment, hiring interns, entry-level attorneys, lateral attorneys for the office. A little bit about the law department, because although we're a very large organization, we have about 950 or so attorneys. We're stealth. People don't tend to know about us going into law school. So we're the lawyers for the city of New York. We do civil litigation, affirmative and defensive for the city. We have a few small transactional divisions and 1 policy advising division. We hire about 50 summer interns each year, about half are 1Ls, about half are 2Ls. We hire anywhere from 40 to 80 entry-level attorneys a year, depending on our ability to hire. So as you can tell, I do tons and tons of interviewing, and I'm happy to share some tips about where we are now and virtual interviewing as well.
Great, thank you very much, Lily. And next we have Robert Romaker. Robert is the managing attorney for the Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York. Welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. As she said, my name is Robert Romaker. I'm a managing attorney at the Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York here in Albany. I work in the Albany office. We cover, all of the capital district counties and a few others. What I do is I supervise lawyers that do housing. Just as an intro, hiring for us, it's been kind of strange because until, I guess, just recently, our funding has been a little shaky and we weren't too sure what was going to happen, except in housing, where there's money that have come through from the federal government for rental assistance and for attorneys. Because of the housing crisis and the eviction crisis and all the moratoriums and everything. So we're kind of expanding in that area, and we had been until recently kind of not expanding in the other areas. So I'll talk about that more. I've been a legal aid lawyer for my entire career, which is 30 years. And I did it for 19 years in Ohio and now 11 years here in New York, and glad to be here and to provide any kind of insight I can about the hiring process from the legal aid perspective, at least upstate.
Great, thank you very much. And Sateesh, Nori, Sateesh joins us from the Queens Neighborhood Office of the Legal Aid Society, New York City, where he is the attorney in charge. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everybody. So I work at the Legal Aid Society in New York City. Legal Aid has 3 practices in New York City. We have about 1,000 lawyers in New York City, something like that. We have 2 unions, lawyer and non-lawyer. Our practices are, we are the public defender within the 5 boroughs. We do civil work, and the biggest area in civil is housing or tenant defense work. And then we have a juvenile rights practice. So we represent minors in delinquency proceedings and also in abuse and neglect proceedings. We have, a dozen or so offices all across New York City. And we're basically involved in almost every aspect of poverty law within the 5 boroughs. So I'll add more later as questions arise, but it's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sateesh. And last but certainly not least, Stacy Smith joins us from Monaco, Cooper, Lamme, and Carr, PLLC, a law firm here in Albany. And Stacy is the firm administrator and marketing director. Welcome, Stacy.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's having a good afternoon. Yes, Stacy Smith from Monaco, Cooper, Lamme, Carr. We're a small firm here in Albany, New York. We opened in January 2020, right in time for COVID. Prior to that, I was with another larger law firm in Albany for 16 years. So, and before that, a smaller firm in Troy, New York. So, dedicated to litigation and business risk management type work. So welcome, everyone.
Great. Thank you so much, Stacy. Okay, so before we start the conversation, I just want to say to our students, if you have questions along the way, feel free to unmute, raise your virtual hand, or pop them into the chat. We want this to be really interactive, and most of all, we want to make sure that your questions are answered, okay? So feel free to do that. And then of course, I will reserve some time at the end for Q&A as well. All right, so here we are talking about the legal job market and legal hiring and recruiting and working remotely. And so I'm gonna start with you, Donna, and I'm gonna ask you, because the recruiting schedule has really turned upside down in many ways. So can you tell us a little bit about what has been the impact of, this virtual world on recruiting from your perspective?
Sure. Well, as you said, right, everything sort of turned upside down, and we needed to rethink how we did things as an industry. And I think that is exciting, at least in terms of a thought process. It's unfortunate what it took to make it happen, of course. So as I think everyone's familiar, the recruiting process that we were used to was taking place in August each year before the 2L year. And because of the pandemic, it changed and it moved to the winter, right? So now it's in January, and we're hiring right now actively for the upcoming summer, as is everyone else. And so that change is an interesting one. There was always conversation around, how did we get here? Why are we doing this all in August? Why is it all happening in about 3 weeks? Who is it benefiting, really? Can people make the best choices this way? And so, there were different answers to those questions. When I started in this industry 20 years ago, that's not how it was. The fall recruiting process took place in the fall, and we visited 1 school a week, and we had the callbacks thereafter, and it took students had 90 days to get back to us about their response to the offer. So there was a lot of change that got us to the point where we were in August. And then this, of course, got us to the point where we're in January. There's advantages that we see as employers to meeting students who have yet another semester's worth of experience in law school, maybe some more exposure to different practice areas through their coursework. And just we're seeing now that people just, have had that, and the conversations can be a little bit different because of that. Understandably, I'm sure there's pressure and stress when this happens in January to have it happen quickly and then, get everything ready for the summer program on your end, on our end. But, from what we see so far, it works. And, the other change, right, is that it's all virtual. We're not meeting anyone in person. So we do it over software like this. and other platforms. And I have to say the feedback across the board has been very positive. People are finding that they can do the initial interviews very well this way, and the callback interviews as we need to this way as well. And I think, this industry has been great about protecting and promoting everyone's health and safety and just pivoting that quickly to do this way.
That's great. Thank you. That's terrific insight. Are any of the other larger organizations that do summer recruiting changing the timeline? Lily, I'm thinking, has your timeline changed at all?
So we started interviewing 2L candidates kind of in late fall, in October, November time, to get just some of the initial interviewing out of the way, just because we worried, we're probably a smaller shop than Donna's, and we just worried about capacity issues with our small recruitment team turning around interviews both for our summer and our entry class so quickly if we started in January. So we started the initial interviews a little bit early for 2Ls actually and 3Ls. But we're doing the callbacks now, and we're also continuing to do some job fair interviews now, some things like PILC and some of the other job fairs, Northeast Balsa. Those are scheduled to happen in January, February, and we're taking part in those as well.
Great. That's helpful.
I don't know what next year will bring, right? We'll see. We'll see what the big firms do, what career services offices set as the interview schedule. We'll kind of respond to that a little bit and see how we feel at the end of the day about how this year went as well.
Right. And Stacy, recruiting at a smaller firm is kind of different altogether. Has there been an impact to your structure of recruiting?
Well, we wouldn't be used to obviously doing it by team meetings or Zoom, but not a lot. I can see that one of our summer interns is actually on this call. We stuck with our fall recruiting and it worked out well. We initially did some Zooming and then actually did meet one-on-one, with all safety protocols. So it didn't change for us all that much.
Okay, great. All right, so now turning to sort of some broader questions, right? A little bit beyond the recruiting, I want to ask about the impact of COVID on hiring more generally. So I'm going to actually start with Bob. Within the world of legal services here in Albany, how has COVID impacted your ability to hire?
Okay, sure. Thank you. Well, obviously COVID has brought about a lot of uncertainty in pretty much every area of all of our lives. And I guess hiring at Legal Aid is no different. Like I had mentioned in the intro, we've been not doing much hiring in anything but housing because we weren't sure what was going to happen with, I think it's largely state funding because a lot of our grants come from the state and we weren't sure. And I guess we're still not entirely sure, but feeling a little bit better about state funding coming through, which will mean that we'll be able to maintain what we have and I guess and possibly even higher. But in housing, we have been hiring, we are hiring, and we'll probably be continuing to hire in our housing unit because of the money that was in the CARES Act back in March, and then the stimulus package that was passed at the very end of the year, and now the anticipated additional stimulus package that the new president has been talking about. And I know the first two, and I think the third are all going to have money for rental assistance, and obviously, if you're going to dole out rental assistance for tenants that are behind in their rent, you've got to have people to do it. So it also will be staff. So what we're doing there, it's kind of a combination of legal services and financial assistance, which works together pretty well. Some agencies do just the financial assistance, and some do just the legal, and we do just a little bit of that too. But when we can kind of do them together, it works out well for clients, makes cases easier to resolve. And so we're kind of going to be, growing. And actually we had to move some attorneys into our housing unit because of the new money and because of the uncertainty about their money, but they're kind of returning back now because the uncertainty is waned. So I expect our hiring will get a little bit back to normal, but in housing we'll continue to kind of ramp up because, as the money flows, the hiring happens, I guess.
Well, that sounds positive to me. I like hearing that money is flowing. Sateesh, I see you nodding your head. Is it similar from your perspective?
Yes, there are three big areas in New York City, and they're generally always funded well. Criminal defense, the juvenile rights practice, and also housing. And in housing, we have a right to counsel for tenants in housing court. And there is legislation right now to expand that right to counsel. And so due to that right to counsel, we've hired hundreds of people over the last 3 years, and we were interrupted by COVID. And so the position of legal aid in New York City and other groups within New York City is we're trying to be prudent about 2021, because when the city takes a hit and there's all kinds of news about the city budget facing a crisis in 2021 and property tax revenue being down by billions of dollars because no one's occupying the hotel rooms and going to the stores and the shops and all that. We face that probably a year later when the city tightens its belt. And so we're trying to be prudent in 2021 so that we can be stronger in 2022. And unfortunately, that means that we're being very conservative about hiring in 2021 all across the Legal Aid Society in New York City. And ironically, it's a time when our clients are most in need of our services. And so we are trying to make it work and keep everyone on board. We're all working remotely, and we are expanding in some new areas that we haven't taken on before. But the thing to underline is that 2021 is a time that we're going to be prudent about hiring, unfortunately. But as for internships, we are interviewing right now. We've been interviewing for a couple of months for internships for this summer. And so I would encourage you to keep your eyes open and seek out those internships. They will all be remote. No one's coming into any offices at the Legal Aid Society. The courts are operating mostly remotely. And so I would say to all of you, think broadly. You can intern anywhere, virtually. Find an internship that you wouldn't normally have been able to travel to and take advantage. You don't have to think in terms of New York City or New York State in terms of the jobs or the experiences that you can gain, albeit, virtually. It's not the same being in Hawaii if you're on Zoom, but you can get a sense of what the work is like and what the culture is like and really figure those things out in a new way.
That's great. Great advice. Great advice. So in terms of, working remotely, I know some of our panelists had, I would say actually all of our panelists probably had summer internship and summer associate programs that were remote last summer. So Lily, let me start back with you and ask you, how did that go? What did you find worked well? What might be changed for this summer?
Yeah, so we had a full summer program last year, 9-week summer program. We just started our entry class attorneys too, 56 new attorneys starting their careers via Zoom from home, starting this past January 4th. So we've onboarded a number of folks, and the summer program went really well. The entry class program so far is going well. We'll see we always do surveys of how people like their programs, and so we'll hear back from the entry class soon, but the summer feedback was all very positive. And I think that's because we knew going in that we needed to set expectations for the attorneys who were going to be assigning work and for the interns who were going to be getting work, that they really needed to have very intentional contact with one another. Because there isn't in a remote environment the ability to just stop by somebody's desk and ask a quick question, right? And if an attorney waited for an intern to come to them. Sorry, the sunlight's now in my face here. Come to them, then the intern might be floundering, right, without the assistance that they need, the feedback that they need to keep going and with their projects. So we did a training for our attorneys to make sure that they gave assignments, gave feedback remotely in a really good way. And then we empowered our interns. We did a training with them too, to talk to them about the importance of them taking control of their summer experience, right? And not sitting back. Even, I understand it's a little scary to reach out, send an email or pick up the phone and call an attorney. But everyone in our office is very nice. And, we have, if you were in the office, you would know that, because we all have open doors and people are only too happy to help somebody with an issue on a case. Put aside a case that's on fire on their desk to help you with the case that's on fire in your hands, right? But you wouldn't know that remotely. And so really giving the interns that permission to reach out and to reach out at any point and to ask questions. That was all very important. We have a lot in place when we're in the office. A lot of different contacts. We have a summer coordinator who manages the work of all of our interns and knows all of the different projects that the interns are working on. All the interns have a mentor, and then we have fun coordinators for each division to ensure that there's some fun events as well, and you're not just talking to attorneys about work. And so we had that all remotely as well, and that I think having that structure really helped. But it really, the attorneys really got into it. They really did the outreach, and the interns did too. And that's the advice that I would really want to give all of you, is that, working remotely can be challenging in that if you don't take that initiative to reach out to people, chat with people, have coffee with people who you work with on Zoom. I know it's a little weird, but do it anyways. You aren't building those relationships. You aren't learning the things that you would learn if you were in the office. If you're not asking, hey, do you have a virtual deposition coming up or any court appearances that I could come observe, you'll miss out on those, where in the office, somebody might stop by your cubicle and ask you if you want to come. So, so do the affirmative outreach yourselves.
Great. Donna, anything to add to that?
I really think everything Lily said applies to our environment, and I'm sure many environments as well. That proactive approach and just owning the awkward of this environment, right, is just what we all have to do. And you can really build relationships if you spend time trying to get to know the people you're working with. It just is a little bit harder, and we have to just be honest about that over the virtual platform. But if we put the effort in, I think we can make great strides.
Great.
Yeah,
thank you.
I would add to that too, which is that this is our new world. And so everything you do on Zoom, you have to do it like you were doing it in a real life conference room. So I hate to say it, but when I don't see people's faces, to me, it's like someone hiding behind their chair or under the conference room table. It's just super awkward. And as someone who is running meetings, I teach a class, I work with clients, you have to treat this like the real world. I think Donna mentioned that, this is awkward and you have to embrace it. And so you have to show up. That's all I can say. This is like being together in real life. Like, this is our new real world. We can't hide. And, supervisors, professors, clients, judges, they all notice that. Like, we have to make this our real world, at least until this whole thing is over. And so you have to commit to that.
I think that's great advice. I see some of our students' cameras turning on. It's okay. Turn on your cameras now. It's not too late. Sateesh, so you sort of led me into the next question, which is, so what after all of this is said and done, what have we learned from working through this experience? What is going to stay the same, and what is going to change?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's interesting to see the things that we can take from this and move forward and make things better. One is the flexibility. So I mentioned earlier, you could be anywhere right now. You could be in any place on earth and still do your work and still show up for this meeting and still talk to a client and still appear in a virtual proceeding. And hopefully that continues. Like, we maintain that flexibility where possible for the long term. And the second thing is, part of that flexibility also brings new access to particularly the clients that we serve and that Bob serves. People who previously, people who had kids, who were disabled, who were elderly, they had to trek to a courthouse or to a legal aid office, in the winter, in the cold, in the rain, and only to be waiting for hours to be seen by a judge or by an intake person. We don't need to do that anymore. This opens up so much more possibility. This allows us to help a lot more people more efficiently. And it gives us the benefit of being flexible. Like, we can be at anything we want to be at. We could be at doing anything else in between the work that we do. And I think everyone can benefit if we embrace this going forward. But there are downsides. There's no human interaction at the same level. We have to pretend like this counts. Like, we have to have coffee with each other in this manner, as someone suggested. We have to, have lunch together, even though we're all watching each other eat on screen. We have to do social events. In my office, we do a trivia game every Friday afternoon. And, half the people show up, but I think they get what they might have been missing from being together in the office and being part of a team. And so, we have to try harder, but I think there's definitely benefits to this that could be permanent if we embrace it and we mix it into real life in the future when we go back to the office.
I saw Stacy nodding along at the remarks you were making, Sateesh. So Stacy, do you want to share what you were thinking about?
I think everyone has been on point thus far. We've learned a lot. You need to take the technology that's available to us and use it to the best of our ability. We also do things on Friday when we're at home. We used to call it Beer Friday. We actually still do, sorry. And you didn't have to drink a beer, but it gave us the opportunity at 4:30 to all Zoom into each other and for half an hour or 45 minutes, have a drink or a soda or eat something and just chat about non-work things. And just try to keep the culture of togetherness thriving, and it works. And you can't continue that while you're in the office, obviously, because you can't be within 6 feet of each other. So there were actually some benefits to it. It forced people into engaging maybe where they wouldn't face-to-face. So we really enjoyed that part. So we hope that continues once we're all back together here in the office. Yeah.
It sounds a lot like what Donna mentioned yesterday in our prep call about trying to build culture, right? And that's something that, Donna, you mentioned yesterday, the bringing people back to the office is important too. And do you want to touch upon that just a little bit?
Sure. I don't think any of us knows quite what that will look like or what that timeline will be, right? It's just too soon to know. But we think about it and we think about, well, what will it mean? And as has been pointed out, there are things we've learned from this time period that we would all love to see carry over and just fold it in when it's not the only way you can do things, but it might be a good option sometimes for a way you do things. But one of the factors and the thing we were talking about on the prep call is the importance of building culture anywhere that you work. And so I think, for many of us, I think you could hear it as we all speak. We're excited for the day when we can safely be together with our colleagues because we enjoy and celebrate the cultures of our workplaces. We've benefited, I can speak for myself working at Cahill for the past 10 years. I built relationships for those 9 years prior to this year. And so I relied on those relationships in this time period. I knew people well, right? And so that allowed me to just continue to do my work. We are thinking about very actively now, how do we do that? How do we create that same comfort, that same ability for people who are just joining us for the first time? like Lily, we just brought in our class this week. So right, it's their first week back here at the firm, and we want to make sure that they feel like they're part of the culture and they're connected and growing in that way as well. So, you know, similar to Stacy, right, where we have programs where people can get together. I think we're all doing that. But we do look forward to the day when we can be together. And I think the conversation just, you know, in the workplace in general will be, how do we still allow the flexibility that people have come to really cherish and work with during this time period, but also create a sense of responsibility to the enterprise that you belong to? And when do you need to show up to help build the culture? And maybe there are teaching moments that happen better in person anyway. So that'll be the balance that we're all discussing and trying to figure out what the future means for that. So it's a lot to figure out, but I think everyone's conscious of all the factors and all the vantage points and perspectives that people have from working from home for the past year.
Yeah. And so turning to do a little bit of forecasting, right? Stacy, I know that your firm, as a pretty new firm, right, has experienced some pretty rapid growth.
We have.
What are the areas of practice that where the firm has experienced growth?
Well, we were fortunate to have practice areas that kind of aligned themselves with the ability to thrive during a period like this. You know, we did litigation and trust and estates and business and corporate work. So we were fortunate that we didn't have a big downturn. We actually grew. So we doubled our footprint. We had people working in the office. We had to double our space. We hired 3 new attorneys. We hired 5 new staff members. So 2020 for us was a growing experience. And we would anticipate that that would continue given our current practices and the room for growth of other practices, especially knowing what's coming up and what practice areas are going to thrive in 2021 and beyond due to the pandemic.
And what about, Bob, from your perspective, will the Biden administration have an impact on the type of work that you're focused on or on practice areas in addition to the housing? Will immigration be a practice area that might grow, or are there others that might be more regulated in the future?
I don't know if it's the more regulations. I think it's it's not just the new administration, but it's also the change in the Senate. Because I know that, and again, it comes down to the funding for state and local governments a lot. For us, we do have we are funded in part also by the Legal Services Corporation, which is a federal agency. And you know, this administration is probably going to be more friendly to that than the prior administration was. But I don't think that will be, you know, a significant change. But the fact that the funding will at least stabilize will allow us, you know, because some of our projects, like we did have an immigration lawyer before, and we had an attorney that did just consumer practice like debt defense and debt collection and things like that, those have kind of been on hold. So it's hard to tell for sure, but I'm hoping that we can, you know, kind of fill those positions because we kind of pride ourselves. I've talked about the housing, but we do, you know, we have done immigration and consumer and some, you know, matrimonial stuff, and we have a tax clinic, and we have a lawyer who assists people that are have HIV or AIDS. We have a senior legal services person that works with seniors. So we have a lot of different projects. We kind of pride ourselves on that, and a lot of different funding sources. So I'm hoping that with the changes politically, that will stabilize our funding so we can continue to, you know, to fill the kind of the positions that have been hanging in the balance, and maybe even expand a little bit. I don't know. It really just kind of depends. It's unknown, but at least get back to having, you know, filling the spots that we had to continue to provide, you know, like a diverse offering of legal services for low-income people in the Capital District and beyond. I'm here in Albany. We have 5 offices. We also cover up north, and Amsterdam and Saratoga. So Catskills to Canada, I guess is what we tell people. So most of the programs I'm talking about are the Albany office, but we do have other offices in other areas. And as Sateesh was saying, we usually have trouble getting, interns and law clerks, and like we have offices in Canton and Plattsburgh. And people don't often want to go there to small towns far away from Albany, but we've had better luck now getting interns, because interns, like, maybe they have a connection there. They don't really, maybe they're from Plattsburgh or the area, but they don't really want to spend a summer there. And while they're in law school, they can still live here and provide assistance to people up there, because of the fact that our clerks were remote last summer. They are right now. They will be this summer as well, as far as we can tell. So it does open up the options for people to, clerk in other areas of upstate New York than just in the Capital District, if that's an interest. And hoping, with the funding stabilizes, we'll be able to, have more offerings for interns and for attorney hires as things kind of stabilize, as we anticipate and of course hope that they will.
Right. Thank you. And I know that New York City is right now, the city agencies, like the state agencies, have a hiring freeze. But Lily, what about filling vacancies?
So we do have a hiring freeze on right now, and we have permission to bring in a small entry class next year. We already know it's fairly limited. We're hoping that expands over the course of the year, and before the entry class would start. They usually start in the fall, but we'll see. A lot depends on how the vaccine rollout goes, how when do people start returning to the city and spending money in the city, and that'll set our budget. So it's a big bit of a question mark, but we are certainly interviewing for entry class spots, with the hope that we'll be able to hire a number of people, as we usually are able to. We are hiring for our summer program. One thing that the law department does is, for our 2L summer interns, we hire like the law firms, in that at the end of the summer, assuming the summer has gone well, they get an offer for the following year's entry class. And we were able to do that last year despite the budget issues, and we anticipate that we'll be able to do that again.
Great. And for students who are interested in applying, right, they can go right to your website?
Certainly, yeah. You can just apply right on our website. If you go to the career section, there's a section for summer honors, and there's a section for entry-level positions as well.
Okay, great. Is that the same for the Legal Aid Society, Sateesh? Right to the website?
Yes, right to the website. You can Google us, Legal Aid NYC, and you'll see, I think it's opportunities, and you'll see whatever postings are available, including summer there.
Okay. And I know that that's the same for Cahill, and of course Cahill participates in our on-campus recruiting program as well. Stacy, how do students find internships and jobs with smaller firms?
Well, we always post to our website. When we're looking for newer students, or even Albany Law School alumni, for instance, we go right to the Career Services Center at the law school, so I'd encourage them to go there. We post everything on LinkedIn, so you can look there. If you don't have a profile, you should, because you're going to be a professional soon. All of the bar associations, we use the Albany Bar, the New York State Bar, and really depending on practice areas, some smaller bar associations outside the Capital District. But use everything that your school can offer you. There's a lot of opportunities in the Career Service Center. It's our first stop, honestly. Yeah.
And Bob, I know we post your postings as your openings as well, I should say. Any further advice on where students can find opportunities with Legal Aid Society of Northeastern New York?
Well, like everybody else has said, the best place for us is to go to our website. We have a a section called employment, which is where you would find attorney jobs, I believe, and one called volunteer, which is for law clerks. We seem like we're on a little bit of a later schedule as far as summer law clerks. We're just starting to kind of collect applications now. What our timeline is usually to try to, encourage people to apply by, coming on panels like this throughout January and February. And then we like to have our hiring done for the summer by spring break. I mean, we don't get a spring break, but we know the students get a spring break. And I know most students want to have their summer lined up by at least then. So that's kind of what we shoot for. But our website, there are a lot of other places that advertise public interest jobs, Indeed, Idealist. There's a PSJD that I don't remember what it stands for, but anywhere, if you Google, public interest lawyer jobs, but for us, you just come directly to our website, and we don't really have a hiring cycle. Ours kind of just ebbs and flows with people leaving and with funding changes, because our funding is always it's very dynamic. We get some grants will get the same that we did before, or some will get more, then we'll have new grants, then we'll have other grants that we don't get or we don't apply for. So it really is kind of constantly changing. And it's different here. When I was in Ohio, we had like 5 funding sources for our legal aid program. Here we have between 35 and 40, which is why we're able to offer assistance in so many different areas of law. But our website is the best place to go. And I would just encourage people, if you're interested in legal aid in the Capital District, check our website frequently, because we're pretty regularly, putting things up, pulling them down, changing them around. I was actually just talking to my boss this morning about, we're looking to hire another housing lawyer now, about to go into a round. And I looked, and the posting that was up there that expired in November. So I said, well, we should probably change that. So, so we'll just kick the date back a few months, because, we went through a hiring process, wanted to hire 2 lawyers, offered 2, only got accepted by 1. So we still got that position there. And so, I would just suggest that people check our website, rather frequently, because it changes a lot.
Great. So I see we're just about at the 2:15 mark, and I promised I would leave time for questions. So I'm going to invite our students to, if you'd like to unmute, if you have any questions, now's your chance. Get the insider information. Okay. If we don't have questions, then I'm going to invite,
Hi, my name is Manion. I just had a question for Sateesh. I wanted to ask sort of how, I guess, diversity in the workplace, how does that contribute to culture, and sort of what have you seen like in your years?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. We recognize diversity in the workplace as key, not just to our office culture, but to be able to represent clients effectively. There is a major issue in our courthouses and among some of our adversaries and the institutions that low-income people in New York City face. And so that's something that we confront every day. And so we recognize it, and we think it has symbolic and real value in making sure that when we hire, we are not only interviewing and screening diverse candidates, but we are hiring them, and we're promoting them, and we're supporting them. And so the Legal Aid Society has made this a big part of our mission. We can do better. We are far from all the way there, but it is something that we are very, very focused on.
Great, thank you. I appreciate you being here, and everybody else too. I appreciate all of your advice. Thank you.
Thanks, Manny. Does anybody else have any questions?
I actually have one.
Jess?
When we're looking forward, moving away from COVID, as things start to get a little bit more, I hate to use the word back to normal, but back to normal, what are we looking at in terms of which practice areas, which regions are expected to have growth in terms of where we're going to be looking in the next couple of years for jobs?
I could probably speak to that if you want me to. Okay, so unfortunately, you're going to see a lot of work in the personal, business, commercial bankruptcy world. Those attorneys are going to be very busy. Evictions, wrongful evictions, plaintiffs and defense litigation from both sides, insurance claims and lawsuits from denials of coverage, those are going to explode. Labor and employment's always hot, and I think we're going to see a lot of wrongful dismissal claims to deal with. Family law, all of this together, time has not proven great for some husbands and wives and their children. Estate planning, people now look at mortality a different way. Anything can happen, right? And they're starting to take their estate planning a little bit more seriously. They're getting their wills and trusts and things like that together. In civil rights claims, everyone has become an expert on the Constitution and their civil liberties. And I think there's going to be more lawsuits, constitutional claims. Those are, and always cybersecurity would be a great place to look. But I think those are some pretty big ones that are really going to increase in practice over the next couple of years.
What about geographic growth? What any predictions? We won't hold you to them. We won't come back in 5 years and say you were wrong, but just curious about predictions.
I don't think geography is going to matter as much. I think that any smart law firm or business is going to recognize flexibility is a key to attracting the best people. And so you don't have to pay $3,000 a month in Manhattan for a studio apartment to work for Harlem Legal Aid anymore. You know, you can live in New Jersey or Westchester or the Bronx and make it work because you don't have to go in every day. And I think if we don't recognize that, we're going to perish. Like, we're not going to get the best people, and everyone needs to be on notice of that. So for you guys as students, like, don't worry about geography anymore, especially for the next, probably for the rest of 2021. Apply for that job that, you know, is far away, because you could do it for the next 6 months from wherever you happen to be. And then you can really impress somebody and build your skills and transfer them to someplace else where you actually want to be physically, or trade up for a different type of job. Whatever the case may be, I think you have a lot more options. You don't have to be limited by geography in the same way.
Yeah, just anecdotally, I did a quick search yesterday on LinkedIn jobs for legal internships with a student I was working with. And I clicked on remote as a filter, and never before have I come up with those results. I mean, they were pretty astounding, and it's exciting in that way, I'll say, at least for the, you know, foreseeable, or I'll say at least for this summer, the possibility of remote internships is something new and different. Any other questions?
Can I ask one about, I sort of had a general question about the remoteness of the internships, because normally in, you know, your in-person experience, you're kind of, I think somebody kind of touched on it, you know, you're shadowing people, you're sort of like watching the ins and outs of, you know, how the office, you know, the culture works. How is that, you know, how is that sort of transferred to a remote world where, you know, the intern still wants to experience those same things, but it's kind of like you're in this box and you're not really sure how to get the most out of it?
Donna, do you want to provide some insight there?
Sure. Yes. I think, you know, one of the things that remains true is putting yourself out there, right? So sounds like you're looking for that. We're looking for those connections. It's showing up, you know, if this is the format we have, it's showing up, it's showing our faces, it's being present. It's picking up the phone. You know, I think we got so used to emailing. I mean, I'll tell you, I would email people who sat 12 feet away from me, you know, just to share information, right, and send it to a group. But it's picking up the phone sometimes and just having a good old fashioned phone conversation. And we intentionally try to build things in that are programs where people can do that. We'll bring people together, we'll create breakout rooms so that people know as an organization, we value time spent like that. And I think that we have to telegraph that to people. And I think that's important too. So people have to kind of join with that energy, but we as organizations, I think, also have to create that time. For example, one of the things we did is we created sort of an overall program that lots of things fall under called Cahill Connect. And so every Friday we send out an email that says, here's all the virtual ways you can get together. And, there's a running club and there's, cooking class, and you can opt into what you want to, as Stacy was saying earlier with her Friday events, right? Like to make it known that we value this as an organization. So that's something you can ask organizations about, of how they're demonstrating that value in this virtual world, because we did all have to pivot and figure out how to do it, in this way. But we also ask you to give the same energy.
Great. Any last questions? Okay, for our panelists, any parting words of wisdom that you would like to give to our students? You've given a lot of wisdom already, so it's okay if you want to take a pass.
I would just say, look for the opportunity in this moment to really expand your horizons. Try out some stuff that you couldn't do before. Really think about why you went to law school and what that means to you, and not necessarily where you want to work and what the name of the place happens to be on the door. None of that matters. If you're happy doing your job, you're happy doing your job. So really expand your horizons and take some risks, because 2020 and 2021 will have those asterisks on them, and who knows what they'll mean later on. So really push it and go for it.
I would say that, obviously law firms look for a lot of things, law review and great writers and analysts, but it's important to be a well-rounded person. It's important for us that you're civic minded and community minded, and that you think of others other than yourself. So, volunteerism is important, and work ethic. So we always look at, what do you do other than go to law school? Do you hold a job? Do you work at night? Do you have children? Do you, how do you balance things? Can you multitask? So just make sure you're not just focusing on law school, but that you're focusing on things outside of yourself and other commitments, and just be a well-rounded person. It really, for a firm like ours, it is really helpful.
So, one thing that I would say is that in this remote environment, it can be challenging to get the substantive on-the-job experience that you can get from in-person clinics and jobs. The challenge of some courts aren't allowing people to virtually appear under student practice orders and things like that. We had that come up this summer. So trying to figure out how you can still get these real world, if you want to be a litigator, litigation experiences, because that's something that we're looking for. We're looking for people who, we mostly hire litigators. We're looking for people who are comfortable in that environment. And it's just, I think, a little more challenging right now getting that experience. Yes, there are these great remote internships, but are you doing a lot of research and writing? Or are you getting the chance to observe depositions, potentially do depositions, go to court, observe court, potentially stand up in court, right? So trying to figure out how to get those experiences, I think, is really important. And then separately, and kind of a different point, is interviewing remotely is awkward. Donna talked about leading into the awkwardness of work remotely. Interviewing remotely is also very awkward, or can be. And so for those of you who haven't had the opportunity yet to do many remote interviews, I'd really encourage you to go to Career Services and have them do mock interviews with you, have alums do mock interviews with you, just so you get comfortable in that environment, because it just is different.
Right. We just had our mock interview program last week, but we're planning an additional.
Good.
So, yeah. All right.
I would just add a plug for cities, really, because I do think we can all be remote and be flexible. And I hope that the future holds that for all of us, because it's been great. But I also feel like we have to reimagine our cities. We've seen things happen here, you know, with outdoor dining and the ways that businesses pivoted to bring what they do to us. And so I think it's also an exciting time for the big cities. And, you know, that's something to think about too, the energy that you bring wherever you go. What will that environment look like?
That's great.
I'm going to put in a little plug too, if I could here. When we're reviewing applications for hiring attorneys, I'm always looking to see if whether people have done public interest clerkships or internships either before, during, or after law school. Almost everybody that we ask the question to as to why do you want to work at legal aid, they say, well, I want to help people. And then, you know, and we look and, you know, if you've got public interest experience through law school, it looks like you do want to help people. Otherwise, it looks like you're saying that because that's what you think the people that are interviewing you want to hear. So I would just encourage people, if you're interested in public interest in law school, do public interest internships and do it in different areas. You know, there are disability advocacy organizations. There are organizations like the one that I work for that kind of do a little bit of everything. So I would encourage people to do that. I also would say that we have hired a lot of our former law clerks in staff attorney positions. So it's pretty seamless for people to come and be interns for us in the summer and then get out of law school the next year or a few years later and then come and work for us. We prefer experienced lawyers. We don't get very many that apply. So we, you know, actually, I talked earlier about how we hired a new lawyer and she got an offer from us and was sworn in as an attorney, and she's from Albany Law, all on the same day. So we don't shy away from hiring brand new lawyers, people straight out of law school. Again, we prefer experience, but if we stuck with that, we probably wouldn't hire that many attorneys when we need them. So I would say, you know, do public interest clerkships if you're interested in public interest, or just to see if you're not interested in public interest. So that way it shows up on your resume. And if you come and clerk for us, you may end up getting an attorney job with us. And the last thing I'll say is that we have just adopted a racial justice priority at our Legal Aid Society after all the events that have happened. And so we are, it's an exciting time to be at Legal Aid up here because we're working really hard to infuse a racial justice component and view into all of the work that we do across the board. So it's an exciting time to be working with us to be part of that.
That's great. Thank you, Bob. That's an incredibly positive note to end up on. And so I want to say thank you to our panelists for spending an hour of your Friday afternoon with us here on Zoom. I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time and your insight and what you've shared here today with our students. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend, and we hope to connect with you again very soon.
Thanks. Have a good weekend,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.